So you stopped with the free people.
Yes, so how Chaudhuri came to this country was first to become a faculty member of this American Academy of Asian Studies. And that was formed by Frederick Spiegelberg, and he invited Alan Watts also, and a number of other faculty also, not as well known. But they had a very interesting program, I suppose. It was a graduate school, but at the same time they had public lectures. And these lectures were very popular in the San Francisco area. In the 1950s, it was very different here. You know, Asia was not as well known at all. And so the idea was to, you know, after World War II, for the Pacific Rim cultures to get to know each other. Part of it was for trade purposes and commerce. But these people also brought the spiritual traditions and the cultural traditions, so it was a very rich conversation. Chaudhuri also started his own institution, which was called the Cultural Integration Fellowship, and he started developing that. And in 1951, it took a few years for it to develop, and by 55, 56, somebody donated a building, which is the current location. So it started to really shape up and become a well-established institution. In the 1960s, a lot of people who used to come to these lectures asked him to teach more formal courses for, you know, accredited kinds of courses, so they can get degrees in this. It was mostly Indian philosophy, Asian philosophies. And he also had a great background in Western philosophy and psychology, and he was able to, you know, create a very interesting discourse between East and West. So this kind of an East-West dialogue was forefronted by him. He was a very unusual person in that he, by many accounts of people who knew him, they called him a self-realized person. It's interesting when you mentioned earlier the idea of enlightenment. I would think that many of those people would say he was an enlightened person. But you know, it's interesting, the word enlightenment may be somewhat non-specific when it comes to more advanced practitioners. I mean, I personally would say, just to respond to that earlier question you had, what is enlightenment? I think it's a term that's been basically popularized through Buddhism and Hinduism in the West, and the idea is that you can reach a state which is, you know, in unity with a much higher consciousness, in fact all the way to the universal or the vastest possible consciousness. So, but I think there are gradations of that, you know. Probably a well-educated a person of a high degree of consciousness, you call him an enlightened person. If you compared him to the average person, his understanding may be enlightened in that sense. But I think depending on your degree of inner attainment, you could have many different levels of enlightenment, or many degrees of enlightenment. But Chaudhuri would definitely be considered by many a self-realized person, meaning that he had an experience of the self, or of the soul, if you will. Sometimes these two terms are almost the same. Self